greenlighting the FBI to expand its investigation into Brett Kavanaugh if they need to, as tensions hit a fever pitch in Washington. Welcome, everyone, to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
How you doing? Good?
Good morning, Bill Hemmer.
Solid hour, too. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. What will the FBI uncover, and what will it mean when the Senate votes on the president's nominee? That brings us to today's Newsroom Newsfeed.
It is a very busy news day in our nation's capital.
President Trump gets testy after being peppered with questions over the FBI investigation into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
I think the FBI should do what they have to do to get to the answer. I want it to be comprehensive. I actually think it's a good thing for Judge Kavanaugh. The one thing I want is speed. The reason I'd like it to go quickly, very simple. It's so simple. Because it's unfair to him at this point.
Democrats, happy to have a pause in a floor vote, are already seeking to expand the investigation, insisting the FBI should interview 23 people.
This list of witnesses is only a beginning. It's not the end of what the FBI needs to do.
It's a little hard at times in all this to tell exactly what the investigation is supposed to be, how long it's supposed to last, and what it's supposed to cover.
It's perilous for Judge Kavanaugh because this investigation should have taken place before he was compelled to testify under oath.
I don't think we're going to find anything new from this supplemental FBI investigation.
The Senate GOP leader vows there will be a confirmation vote for Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh by the end of this week.
Their goalposts keep shifting, but their goal hasn't moved an inch. We'll be voting this week.
It's time for senators to be senators and to grow some guts and cast a vote. And I am embarrassed for the United States Senate. We have hit bottom and started to dig.
Mike Emanuel picks up the coverage there live from the Hill. And Mike, good day to you. What is the state of play this hour there on the Hill?
Well, there's a definite focus, Bill, on addressing the concerns of a few key moderates. Republicans Susan Collins of Maine, Jeff Flake of Arizona, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska are critical Republican votes. Leadership can only afford to lose one of them and still confirm Judge Kavanaugh. Last night in New Hampshire, Flake talked about this moment.
We all have to have a process that we can have faith in. I, for one, I'm waiting for the additional information that will come from the supplemental FBI investigation to inform my decision on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to make sure those senators are comfortable, but he says Democrats will never be satisfied.
In my judgment, the pattern of behavior we've seen confirms what Democrats' own public statements have told us. They're committed to delaying, obstructing, and resisting this nomination with everything they've got.
The Senate's gaveling into session this hour, and away we go. Bill?
Yeah, what about the accusation Democrats are moving the goalposts? Mitch McConnell says the goal hasn't moved an inch, but the goalposts have.
Right. Initially, the concern was addressing the allegation from Professor Christine Blasey Ford. Then it shifted to Judge Brett Kavanaugh's drinking as a teenager, some complaining about his fiery defense last week in honor of his integrity and his name. And now 9 out of 10 Judiciary Democrats are demanding the FBI interview 23 people as a part of this probe.
This list of witnesses is only a beginning. It's not the end of what the FBI needs to do. And anything short of a full, fair investigation will be a sham. And straitjacketing this investigation is absolutely unacceptable. I think we can agree.
That seems to set the stage for Democrats to complain that whatever the FBI does, it's not enough. Bill?
Thank you, Mike. Mike Emanuel there on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
For more on all this, let's bring in America's A-Team, Adrian Elrod, former Director of Strategic Communications for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio, also a Fox News contributor, and Judy Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor. Now that we've gotten through the resumes, awesome A-Team this morning. Let's go dip in first. Hold on, A-Team. Senator Mitch McConnell is speaking on the floor right now. Let's dip in and listen here.
Named. Several Democrats on the Judiciary Committee indicated they'd oppose whomever the nominee might turn out to be. The junior senator from California, for example, explained on television that whoever President Trump chose would bring about, quote, the destruction of the Constitution of the United States, as far as I can tell. That, incredibly enough, is a member of the Judiciary Committee. Of course, mere hours after Judge Kavanaugh was announced, my friend, the Democratic leader, made the announcement that has now become famous. "I will oppose him with everything I've got," he said. And not long after that, another Democrat on the Judiciary Committee proclaimed that anyone supporting Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation was, quote, listen to this, complicit in the evil. Complicit in the evil. These statements are the context for every action the Democrats have taken during this entire process. These statements remind us Democrats may be trying to move the goalposts every 5 minutes, but their goal has not moved an inch. They will not be satisfied unless they have brought down Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. It started with straightforward political maneuvering. None of it worked, of course, but whatever excuses they could find to delay. First, back in June, the Democrats tried to argue the Supreme Court shouldn't confirm, Democrats tried to argue the Senate shouldn't confirm a Supreme Court justice in any even-numbered year. Any even-numbered year. Then they were reminded that Justice Kagan, Breyer, and Souter were all confirmed during midterm election years, and that argument evaporated. Next, Democrats said the process should be delayed because too few documents were available from Judge Kavanaugh's past public service. Well, then they received the most pages of documents ever produced for a Supreme Court nomination, so guess what came next? The goalpost moved down the field, and the Democrats called for delay because there were too many documents for them to read. I wish this fight could have remained in the realm of normalcy. But when none of these tactics worked, when Judge Kavanaugh demonstrated his widely acknowledged brilliance, open-mindedness, and collegiality at his confirmation hearings, some chose a darker road. The politics of personal destruction were willfully unleashed. I've spoken at length about the underhanded way Senate Democrats have treated Dr. Ford and her allegation. In brief, for 6 weeks, Dr. Ford's confidential account passed from one Democratic member of Congress to the Democratic side of the Judiciary Committee to the Washington, D.C. lawyers that Senate Democrats handpicked for her. Then, well, after Judge Kavanaugh's hearings had wrapped up, the supposedly confidential letter found its way into the press. Shoving aside proper procedure, shoving aside the accuser's plea for privacy, this, Madam President, is not politics as usual. Because let us not forget, Dr. Ford's allegation is not the only uncorroborated allegation that has been breathlessly paraded around. Oh, no. Shortly after Dr. Ford's confidential letter made its way into the press, the floodgates of mud and muck opened entirely on Brett Kavanaugh and his family. Out of the woodwork came one uncorroborated allegation after another, each seemingly more outlandish than the last. A tabloid lawyer organized a red carpet rollout for someone who wanted to accuse Judge Kavanaugh of masterminding some kind of high school drug and serial sexual assault ring, hosting one wild party after another filled with sexual violence for which there conveniently happened to be 0 witnesses. 0 witnesses. But plenty of people to refute the claims. This didn't say in the tabloids, by the way. This fantastic story was effectively read into the record of the Judiciary Committee by the ranking member, who decided it deserved a mention in her remarks during last Thursday's hearing. And every Democratic member of the Judiciary Committee seized on this outlandish tale in a formal letter in which they called on Judge Kavanaugh to withdraw his name from consideration. This is how desperate some became for any way to stop this stunningly qualified nominee. I guess upholding any standards of any kind was just too much to ask. We heard another anonymous, unattributed, and now thoroughly debunked account. This time, an anonymous accusation from Colorado alleging physical abuse 20 years ago. A sitting federal district judge quickly stepped up to bat down that anonymous smear. We heard that Judge Kavanaugh was supposedly responsible for a sexual assault on a boat in Newport, Rhode Island, until the accuser recanted the story completely, but not before many in the media had begun eating it up. In short, Democrats' mishandling of Dr. Ford's letter opened the floodgates for this deluge of uncorroborated, unbelievable mud. And the mudslide was cheered on and capitalized on at every turn by the far left that has been so eager to stop this nomination. Just politics? I don't think so. And on the other extreme, some of the other lines of attack have been completely trivial. Last night, the New York Times unleashed this major story. Get this. Judge Kavanaugh may have been accused of throwing some ice across a college bar in the mid-1980s. Talk about a bombshell. One can only imagine what new bombshell might be published today or tomorrow. But here's what we know, Madam President. One thing for sure. The Senate will vote on Judge Kavanaugh here on this floor this week. Here on this floor this week. Our Democratic friends will try to move the goalpost yet again. Just yesterday, they submitted a list of 24 people whom they wanted the FBI to interview. So I'm confident we'll hear that even the very same supplemental FBI investigation Democrats had so loudly demanded is now magically no longer sufficient. Well, after the FBI shares what they've found, senators will have the opportunity to vote. We'll have the opportunity to vote no on the politics of personal destruction. We'll have the opportunity to vote yes on this fine nominee. Now, Madam President, on an entirely different matter. The U.S. economy continues to deliver very good news. My home state of Kentucky is certainly no exception. Yesterday morning, I had the opportunity to take part in the announcement of a major new investment.
Senator Mitch McConnell speaking on the Senate floor on the Kavanaugh confirmation process, saying this is the time for endless delay and obstruction. This has come to a close. Mr. President, he was addressing President Trump specifically. We will be voting this week. He called Ford's uncorroborated allegations breathlessly paraded around by Democrats. They are trying to bring down the Kavanaugh confirmation. Senator McConnell speaking on the Senate floor right now, obviously in the middle of what is going to be a very telling week. He says on this floor, this vote will happen this week. Our A-team joins us now. Adrienne Elrod, Guy Benson, Judith Miller. Your thoughts as you were listening on to the Senate Majority Leader?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind Mitch McConnell is the one who would not even allow Merrick Garland to get a hearing. So, first of all, we're starting off with that. So he's accusing Democrats of playing politics. Well, he also played politics given the fact that Barack Obama clearly had the chance to nominate a Supreme Court justice, and he would not even give him a fair shake. But secondly, I'm continuously amazed by watching the Republican Party completely dismiss women who come forward with credible sexual harassment allegations.
There's currently an FBI investigation that the White House says investigate all the accusers that have come forward.
But yeah.
McConnell was applying the Schumer and Biden standard to the Democrats with Merrick Garland, and the opposition to Garland is completely different in nature than the opposition we've seen here.
No nominee in the final year.
Right, to Brett Kavanaugh in this case. I thought that was a terrific speech. by Mitch McConnell, laying out the context for all of this. And one of the key points that he made was about this accuser, Ms. Swetnick, who claimed that there were gang rapes and that sort of thing. She went on another network yesterday and totally changed her story in a number of huge, meaningful ways. And McConnell pointed out
but yet everybody is giving her a chance for her to speak.
And she did, and I actually hope
Red Solo Cups doing what?
Yeah, she said that she was aware of them spiking the punch. Now she says, well, they were near the punch. And she said there were gang rapes at the party. Well, maybe there were gang rapes at the party, and he was there, and maybe he did it, but I'm not really sure.
But McConnell's point is that that was entered into the record last week during the hearing.
By Senator Feinstein, and more importantly, before the hearing with Dr. Ford on Thursday, on Wednesday, this Avenatti bomb gets dropped, and all Democrats on the Judiciary Committee validated it by reacting to it with an official letter calling on Kavanaugh to withdraw based on a story that they knew nothing about. And the more we learn about it, the more it looks like a complete ludicrous hoax.
Yeah.
Let's get you this.
You work for the New York Times. Front page story, throwing ice 40 years ago?
Well,
bombshell, McConnell called it.
Yeah, I know that Senator McConnell does not like these stories. I know that Page 6 and the New York Post and tabloids love these stories. We don't know how much of this is true or not, but I think it's all irrelevant, because what this is really about, and Republicans would like this to go away, is Dr. Ford's very credible allegations about what happened to her more than 30 years ago.
Exactly.
Now,
with all due respect, there's been no corroboration of anything she delivered last week.
We don't know yet what the FBI will turn up with, but in the very short amount of time that they have to investigate, I think they will at least say something about what she has said. They must, or this entire investigation is a sham. And I don't think the Republicans can afford to have that perception be what nominates, what actually leads to his confirmation. Judge Kavanaugh's
Stand by to Ollie. I apologize for interruption. Chuck Schumer's on the floor of the Senate now. Drop it.
Give me a break. The leader would delay for 10 months when he thought it was right to do, and can't wait for a week to get an honest report out of the FBI? What a double standard. How galling. Accusing Democrats of needlessly delaying a Supreme Court nomination is galling, is hypocritical, coming from a leader who delayed the nomination of a Supreme Court justice for over 300 days until his party had a chance to win the White House. So no American should accept his admonishments about delay. He's the master of delay. And second, he blames Democrats for these delays. Well, as the leader well knows, Democrats are not in charge. We can't set the calendar. These things have been delayed because people on his side of the aisle who had sincere concerns about having a fair process said they won't go forward unless the process is made fairer. Even the initial hearing, where Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh testified, was because a member of the Judiciary Committee on the Republican side said he didn't want to go forward until he heard from them. Nothing to do with Democrats. Did we agree that that should happen? Of course. So did most people who are fair-minded. But it wasn't caused by us. And then this FBI, the reopening of the FBI investigation into these new allegations, background check investigation, who caused that? Who caused this delay? I'd ask Leader McConnell. Not the Democrats. We don't have the ability to do it. It was 3 members on his side who sincerely were seeking better truth because they heard 2 arguments and they weren't sure which was right. And they saw that without some kind of independent investigation, it would tear the American people apart in ways for which we will pay a price years down the road, no matter what the outcome of the vote on Judge Kavanaugh. So Democrats didn't cause these delays, and he knows it. It was the inability of all the Republicans to be unified with justification, because the truth should be sought after in a more sincere way for a nomination to the highest court of the land. Leader McConnell has said we're going to plow right through the recent allegations. Fortunately, some members on his side of the aisle didn't want to plow right through. They didn't want to delay unnecessarily. 1 week? Give me a break. Compared to 10 months? Leaving the Scalia seat open? Who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? Who is making this a political argument? Let's ask. And one final point. The leader kept accusing the people who came forward of political smear campaigns, of being in the mud. I want to ask the leader to answer a direct question. Does he believe or not believe Dr. Ford? Yes or no? I happen to believe her. He refuses to answer that, one way or the other, because he knows that Dr. Ford had tremendous credibility. Instead, he calls her names. He uses it as Democrats, but she came forward on her own. And by the way, one of the first things she did was call the Washington Post and spoke to the reporter who later wrote the story. That was long before any Democrat knew what was going on. She felt a sincere need to come forward. To call her political, which is what, by ricochet, the leader is doing, is so unfair, is so wrong. To call all three of these women who came forward, whether you believe them or not, as political actors, is treating women in the same way that unfortunately too many women, as we've learned over the last few years, have been treated in the past. That doesn't mean allegations shouldn't be proven. That doesn't mean there should be a discreet, fair process to try and get to the bottom of it, which is what the FBI investigation is. That doesn't mean all men are guilty before proven innocent. It means there deserves to be a fair hearing, even if it takes 1 week. 1 week compared to the 10 months of delay. And finally, Madam President, the investigation itself, it should only take a week. That's for sure. No Democrat has called for it taking more than a week. We are not moving the goalpost back. But it should be thorough. It should not be limited by the Senate Judiciary staff, who was initially calling the shots, and they've been biased to begin with. When the Democratic staff asked to be on the phone with the counsel to the president, Mr. McGahn, the Republican staff refused. That's not bipartisan. That's not fair. That's not even-handed. But fortunately, yesterday, the president said the FBI should go forward. They can interview many people in a week. When there's a crime situation that calls for it, a terrorism situation that calls for it, from what I understand, they've interviewed hundreds in a week. So a list of 20 people to be interviewed in a week when the FBI has thousands of agents, many of them well-trained in the art of figuring out how to interview somebody, is not unreasonable. It's only fair. And we hope that there are still no limitations on the FBI investigation. We hope that there are no limitations, because that will jaundice the whole process. And that is not what those who called for it on either side of the aisle had asked for. They'd asked for it to be full and fair and open, and then everyone will make his or her judgment. That's all people are asking for. Finally, Madam President, so on that issue, I call on President Trump and the White House once again to release in writing what White House counsel Don McGahn has instructed the FBI to pursue. Until then, we have to take President Trump's off-the-cuff comments with perhaps grains of salt. We have to be shown that what he said is actually being implemented. Now let me read you a few quotes. The Supreme Court must never, never be viewed as a partisan institution. That's Judge Kavanaugh, his 2006 confirmation hearings. Here's one more from a speech Judge Kavanaugh gave in 2015. First and most obviously, a judge cannot be a political partisan. I think most Americans would agree with that. I certainly do. A lodestar in our consideration of judicial confirmations should be whether a nominee is independent and within the ideological mainstream. The Judge Kavanaugh we saw last Thursday did not meet the standard laid out in his past statements. His prepared statement to the committee, prepared, if you will, malice aforethought, accused sitting U.S. senators of a phony smear campaign, lambasted, quote, left-wing opposition groups, and portrayed the recent allegations, the allegations of Dr. Ford, Ms. Ramirez, the third person who came forward, Ms. Swetnick. He portrayed those as revenge on behalf of the Clintons. Frankly, Judge Kavanaugh's testimony was better suited for Fox News than a confirmation hearing for the august United States Supreme Court. But that's in character with Judge Kavanaugh's long history of working for the most partisan legal causes. Ken Starr, Bush v. Gore, all the myriad controversies of the Bush era. It would be one thing if Judge Kavanaugh discarded his partisan feelings once he donned the black robes of a jurist. Unfortunately, he's been on the bench for many years, and Thursday's hearing revealed that his bitter partisan resentments still lurk right below the surface. It should give us all pause to consider what it means to elevate such a partisan worldview to the Supreme Court, whether it be a Democratic or Republican partisan view, where rulings must be made on the legal merits, not on the side of the aisle which most benefits. And then the greatest issue against Judge Kavanaugh, that one that really bothers most people, his credibility. Is he telling the truth? That issue supersedes all the others. There may be some who say, well, what happened in high school shouldn't count. It's many years later. People grow, people change. Now, I think what happened to Dr. Ford, and she seems credible to me, is something you can't forget. It's not what men do. But some may say that. But we are looking at what Judge Kavanaugh says at age 53, not what he did at age 18. We are looking at his credibility now as a grown adult. And if you believe Dr. Ford, then Judge Kavanaugh is not telling the truth. And if this were the only instance, it would be one thing. Bad enough. But there are many more. Over and over again, it's hard to believe what Judge Kavanaugh swore under oath at the committee hearing to say. Just yesterday, NBC News reported that either Judge Kavanaugh or people close to the judge were in communication with his Yale classmates to get them rebut allegations by Deborah Ramirez, later published in The New Yorker. Beyond the unseemliness of a federal judge pressuring former classmates to support his nomination, it seems that Judge Kavanaugh was at least very misleading to the Judiciary Committee about Ms. Ramirez's story. When asked by Senator Hatch when he first heard of Ramirez's allegations, he answered, quote, in the New Yorker story. First heard. Based on the NBC reports, if they're correct, that was not truthful. And it would be one thing if that were one isolated incident. But again, there are far too many misstatements, far too many inaccuracies, far too many mischaracterizations. He pled ignorance to many Bush-era controversies, only for emails to be released showing he was aware of them all and played a role in many. He offered explanation for high school yearbook quotes, and it's not the quotes themselves or what they indicated. It's his explanations sort of defy belief. And of course, based on the accounts by his high school and college classmates, he has grossly mischaracterized his relationship with alcohol. The common thread? Judge Kavanaugh repeatedly tiptoes around the truth, doesn't tell the truth, in many instances it seems, to paint his nomination in a favorable light. We want a Supreme Court nominee, whatever their politics, whatever their party origins, to be a shining example of someone who tells the truth without doubt without equivocation. If you say, well, maybe he's telling the truth and maybe he's not, he doesn't belong on the Supreme Court. And I think most Americans are saying that. Again, even if you want to discount, as some people do, what happened when he was 15 in high school and 18 in college, you cannot discount what he is saying and professing at age 53 when it flies in the face of being truthful. That's the key question here. There is demeanor. He sure didn't show the demeanor of a judge at the hearing. There is partisanship. He brought out the most raw form of partisanship, so unbecoming of someone on the district court, federal appeals court, let alone the Supreme Court. And he did not show any semblance to always being 100% honest and truthful, which is what we need in a Supreme Court justice. So again, even if you feel that what happened when he was 15 and 18 shouldn't matter, what happens when he's 53 does matter, and his credibility is in real doubt. Doubt enough, I think, for most Americans to say this man does not belong on the Supreme Court. There ought to be somebody, many people, who would be a whole lot better. I yield the floor.
Chuck Schumer on the floor. I take it he's a no vote. That has not changed. Back with the A-team, Adrian and Guy and Judith. And we were listening as he was talking, and he's locked in on this 1 week. If we're to assume that the 1 week started last Friday, that will conclude this coming Friday.
He seems to be.
It's possible the FBI could finish his work prior to that.
He seems to be endorsing this supplemental investigation for 1 week. There was a lot to unpack there. I wish I had half an hour because I think there was a lot of misleading statements and hypocritical statements from Chuck Schumer there. I just think, big picture, when he's talking about the delays, the Democrats had in their possession this allegation from Dr. Ford 2 months ago, and they sat on it and then deployed it through a leak after the hearings. That was the ultimate delay here, and for him to pretend this was all about the Republicans is silly. Once again, we heard him reference Mrs. Ramirez from Yale, who, according to the New York Times herself, doubted her own story, isn't sure it was Kavanaugh. And then he mentioned Swetnick as well, who reversed herself on the court charges on NBC yesterday. So
does it appear, though, when Schumer talks about temperament, that they're now moving the argument away from sexual assault because those charges are falling apart?
Right, they're upset.
Now you go after his performance from last week.
Correct. He was too partisan. No mention of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's very partisan comments about President Trump. And temperament, oh, they're very scandalized that this man got very angry when being called a gang rapist and a liar by the committee. Imagine that.
Let's listen to what Lisa Murkowski, a key figure in all this, had to say just moments ago, talking to our own Kristen Fisher. Listen.
I don't know what it is that will come back. I have had a conversation with Mr. McGahn about the extent of what the FBI is doing. And what I have been assured is that they are conducting this background investigation, as they do all background investigations, allowing for the investigation to take its course.
Senator Cornyn echoed similar sentiment. Let's see what comes of the investigation before he can decide.
And Joe Manchin, too, from West Virginia.
Right. I think those are the swing votes. They will decide whether or not Judge Kavanaugh becomes Justice Kavanaugh, and they must be persuaded that this is not a sham investigation. And therefore, any effort, I think, to limit it, even if the Democrats are accused of delaying it, will undermine and undercut the effectiveness of what the Republicans are hoping to do, which is to get this man on the court. I think that these undecideds are so important, and we've got to follow exactly what they say now.
Let's not lose light of what Rachel Mitchell concluded in her report to senators. This is number 6, guys, the full screen. Put it on screen here. A he said, she said case is incredibly difficult to prove, but this case is even weaker than that. Dr. Ford identified other witnesses to the event, and those witnesses either refuted her allegations or failed to corroborate them. I do not think that a reasonable prosecutor would bring this case based on the evidence before the committee. Where was that argument since last week?
Let's first of all remember that she was the quote-unquote assistant, as Mitch McConnell hired her, or called her, the female assistant to
Chuck
be.
Grassley hired her. She's
Chuck
worked
Grassley.
for Democrats. She's worked for Republicans, well-respected in sex crimes.
No, but look, I think ultimately what we're dealing with here is Brett Kavanaugh temperamentally fit? Does he have the qualifications to be on the Supreme Court for this reason? What I saw, I take your point, the guy that you just mentioned earlier, but what I saw was a very angry man testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee in front of millions of Americans based on him being upset that he was being accused of very, very credible allegations by Dr. Blasey Ford. I personally do not think that he is qualified just on that alone. He also showed a very partisan tenor.
There it is again. You're moving the argument. It doesn't have to do about these allegations from 36 years ago.
Ms. Mitchell.
It has everything to do with those
I noticed that you did not dispute a single fact that Ms. Mitchell laid out in her memo. She's a 25-year sex crimes prosecutor. It was a very thorough document.
Hired by the Republicans.
That's fine. She says, I'm a registered Republican. I'm not a partisan.
They didn't have the guts to ask the question.
Adrian, because you would have said it's a bunch of white men asking the questions, and folks on your side would have absolutely said that. You were already saying it. She laid out 5 pages of facts, not a single one of which you've even attempted to deal with here, instead pivoting to the anger of Judge Kavanaugh. If you or someone that you loved was falsely accused of something on a massive stage and dragged through the mud, wouldn't you be angry?
Yeah, I would want their name cleared, and I would want the FBI to do everything they could within their power to investigate
so
this.
the anger's fine,
which Brett Kavanaugh did not initially want to do. He did not want an FBI investigation.
He said he would do anything that the committee decided, and the committee decided FBI
after he was asked in front of millions of Americans on national television by the Senate Judiciary Committee.
He'd gone through 6.
We can go on and on, but I'll tell you, goalposts are heavy.
Yeah.
But they can be moved. Inch by inch. Adrian, thank you. Guy, thank you.
Judith.
We'll have you back.
This is not a court of law. Ms. Mitchell may be right about the standard being this is not proof, but this is the court of public opinion.
It is only, what is it, Tuesday?
It's Tuesday morning.
It's only Tuesday. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
In a moment here, midterm elections, 5